Welcome to the Soulish Podcast. My name is Whitney Apke and I'm your host. On the Soulish Podcast, we talk about the soul journey, the body, soul, spirit connection. And I bring on guests who are thought leaders, truth seekers, and also body workers, energy workers, healers, good people, entrepreneurs that have just good hearts that want to help humanity. And this podcast started almost 3 years ago, where I was in this transition state between religion and spirituality, and I went on a completely different soul journey. I had no idea that I was actually in my Saturn return, towards the tail end of it, and was really kind of coming out of that feeling like a different person. And what I was doing, how I was living my life, the decisions I was making, who I was dating, it just didn't fit anymore. It didn't work. It didn't feel aligned. I felt so out of place and out of alignment. And so I started to pursue other ideas, other thoughts, other belief systems, and was really trying to find where is home, where is center, where is alignment now, because I'm leaving an entire belief system behind, or at least it felt like it, although it's not quite accurate. I still definitely value like Christian upbringing and my values and all of that, but there's a lot of good there, good values there, morals there. But I felt like I was failing my family. I was failing my parents. I was failing those that saw me as a pastor, because I was a pastor for a few years. Went to ministry school as well, and was born and bred for that life and for that purpose of healing people, helping people heal, work through their shit. And I still have and have always had a huge heart for people and to help people. And so as I'm in this transition, I was like, man, I'm working the corporate life. I'm trying to make money and survive in California, with rent and bills and stuff. And I finally am in a relationship with someone that I know loves me, that I love. And yet I feel totally disastrous. I feel like I am not where I should be, where I want to be. I don't feel in alignment. I'm now butting heads and miscommunicating, and things were just misfiring because I just wasn't in alignment anymore. And I was leaving one life and coming on to the next. And so all that to say, it's been a journey, but the Soulish Podcast was born out of that place of that heart to want to help people and serve people, even in the mess, even in the ish. And that's why this podcast is called the Soul Ish Podcast, because we all have ish, we all go through ish, and it's how we go through the ish, what the ish ends up bringing up in us, and what we end up pursuing, and also healing or shifting or transmuting. And there's such beauty in really going through a struggle or a challenge. There's beauty there. There's gold there. There's things that, like little nuggets of wisdom that I have from that experience of leaving a religion without hurting people, or doing my best to not hurt anyone in the process, and to not make anyone feel less than because I'm moving away. That was like something that I saw other people do, and I was like, I don't want to do that. They're valuable where they are now, like, and their belief system is valid for them. It just isn't valid for me, but that doesn't make them wrong or stupid or blind or dumb or unconscious. And I still see that a lot in the spiritual community. There's a lot of judgment, and I honestly don't think that's very cool. I think that's very judgy. That's called spiritual ego 101. No one's journey is less valuable, less meaningful, less worthy of validation and confirmation that they are right where they're meant to be. And so that's what I love about this podcast, is I bring on people from all walks of life, all belief systems, all ideas and thought, all modalities. Psychic witchy shit was so not okay growing up. Like, oh my God, like I would pray against that. I would pray against witches and and thought psychics were evil. And yet I've had a couple mediums and psychics on the show, and I myself say now that I am psychic intuitive. It's just so funny, the meaning that I placed on that, and the darkness I placed on that, and realizing it's not dark. It's not all dark. It's really dependent on the intention, right? So I really just weigh things out based off of someone's intention, not necessarily what they believe in, if I agree or disagree with it. And that's a total huge shift from what I grew up doing, and grew up being taught to do, and taught to think about others and other people that were outside of my religion, my belief system, and that I needed to convert them. And that never really felt like truthful, honest, kind, loving. I was like, Jesus never really did that. But anyway, I digress. So today we have an amazing episode with Kevin Palmieri. He is an amazing entrepreneur, has an amazing life, has an amazing journey that I just so connected with, because we all have been there where we have that realization that I am not doing what I want to be doing, and I am not who I want to be. And a lot of times we end up just kind of like caving into that, like that feeling, and just kind of sitting in that for a while. And then sometimes it motivates us to do more. And Kevin has really had a struggle in that entrepreneur life, and he's done it the hard way, not the easy way, the long way, not the short way. And I have mad respect for him. One of his quotes from Instagram was one of my favorites. It was, "There's a big difference between happiness and fulfillment." And so we talk about this in this episode together on what is it to be happy and what is it to be fulfilled? What is the difference between the two? And he says that, "I think happiness is results based. Like, if this happens, then I'm happy. And I think fulfillment is mission based. I'm on purpose doing what's aligned, and so I feel fulfilled." Whether or not you have immediate success, long-term success, or ever are quote unquote successful, it's because you know that you're doing what you're meant to be doing. You're on purpose, you're mission based. And therefore, because you're living the mission, you're fulfilled. So this episode is an amazing episode. It's such a great episode for the beginning of the year, of what are your goals? How do you pursue them? What is happiness? What is fulfillment? How do you suss that out? So I hope you guys enjoy it. It's going to be an amazing episode. Thank you, Kevin, so much for coming on to the Soulish podcast. It's a privilege to have you here. It's a privilege to have such an amazing podcaster as well on my podcast, because I can relate with the hard work and the diligence and the consistency that it takes to keep a podcast going and to be as successful as you've been. You are a founder and co-host of the Next Level University podcast, and you're in the top 100 and have over 1,100 episodes, which is a huge accomplishment. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the heart and the soul. And if I can add value, that is my goal. So I appreciate you having me, and thank you for the wonderful words.
Of course, it's all true. Sorry, I no lie. I really connected with your story of just kind of your journey. And I think it's really fascinating, because I know just from doing this and being 120 plus episodes in, 1,100 over that episodes is quite a feat in just like looking ahead. And I know that that's not easy. It's hours of work. And at the beginning, you're not monetizing. It's hard to get monetized as a podcast. And it takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of like gut. You got to like really feel passionate in order to make a podcast successful, and really any business successful, I think. But I just really love your story. And you actually, I don't know much of like how you even found or discovered that podcasting or anything like that in that space was a dream of yours, but you're literally living the dream. And for those who are trying to pursue living the dream, I wondered if you could share with us how you even discovered the dream, and any other dreams that you have, how you discovered that and how you began pursuing that dream.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think for many of us, our dreams and our fantasies and our ideal lives are revealed through pain. Unfortunately, I've just seen that happen so many times for people, where usually pain is the wake-up call that makes you realize, oh, you know what? Whatever journey I'm on in my life is not the journey that I want to stay on. Yeah. So for me, it was this very interesting thing where I had my quote unquote perfect life. where I had a model girlfriend, I had a high-paying job, I had a sports car, I had a new apartment. Quite literally, I had the body of my dreams because I just competed in and won a bodybuilding show. So everything from the outside seemed awesome. And my girlfriend at the time ended up leaving me
Mm.
because internally I was not a confident human being. I was very insecure. I was very scarce. I was overly controlling. I wasn't the best version of myself. I wasn't an abundant Kevin. My girlfriend ends up leaving me. And then I convince myself that the only way to fill the internal voids that I have is to make more money. So I'm like, all right, well, my girlfriend's gone now. I don't really like myself, but if I make more money, I think I'll
Yeah.
like myself even
Yeah.
more, which is great.
Yeah.
So that next year, so my job at the time, Whitney, I worked in an industry called weatherization. So all
Mm.
that means is we would go into buildings and we would make them more energy efficient. That was
Got it.
my job in a nutshell.
Yep.
Since I worked for a company that got state contracts, I would make anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour, which I'm 25, 26 years old. I don't
Pretty
have a
good.
college degree, right? Like I'm crushing it. I feel really, really good. So the year after my girlfriend left me, I got a promotion and I became a foreman at my company. So that just means I run the job, I start the job, I close the job out. So I'm working a lot of hours, but that's directly in alignment with the goal I want. So I don't care. So if we
Right.
fast forward to the end of that year, I had been on the road for 10 months out of the 12 months. Every
Woo.
single week. Yeah, it wasn't fun. It was definitely a challenge. But again, I had an understanding that if I want to get the goal, this is the journey. This is what it's going to take.
Yep.
So I remember towards the end of that year, I was home for a weekend, and one of my friends, who's now my co-host and the CEO of our company, he interviewed me on his YouTube channel. And he was just like, yeah, we'll talk about fitness and mindset. And I was like, all right, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to do this. I've never done this. I don't know if I know anything, but whatever. Let's see what happens. After that interview, it was like an hour and a half. We just had a conversation, much like we're having today. And
Mm-hmm.
my other friend was there. And I said, imagine if you could do that for a living. Like, imagine if you could do
Wow.
that for a living. That went
Wow.
by so fast. That would be amazing. And one of my buddies said, you can. I mean, there's people out there that do it. So that kind of started the thought for me. So I end up making $100,000 at 26. And this all happens in the course of a couple months.
Yeah.
I opened my final pay stub and I remember thinking that, oh, wow, I made $100,000 and I felt really good for all of 5 minutes. And then it was still, I had to go to bed with Kevin, right? I was still going to bed with the same version of Kevin internally. And I realized that for most of my life, especially that year, I had lived unconsciously. The opposite
Mm.
of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And that really is where it all started for me. Now, the interesting thing is in the beginning, I don't think I took it as seriously as I could have. In the beginning, it was very much just having conversations with friends about stuff that I thought mattered. But something very interesting happened.
Mm-hmm.
As I started falling in love with the job, with the podcast, I started falling out of love with my job. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't travel. I didn't care. I start calling out. I start showing up late, leaving the job site early. And I could just tell that I wasn't in alignment. I could tell that there was an opportunity for fulfillment within this podcasting thing. I could just feel it. I don't know how to explain it, but I just knew if I could do that, my life would be drastically different and I would vibrate higher. I would just be so much happier all the time. I'd be
Mm-hmm.
on a mission. I'd be living on purpose. So my job just kept expecting and requiring more and more and more of me. And my really rock bottom basement moment that shifted this all for me. I was in a hotel room in New Jersey and my alarm clock went off at 5:15 in the morning. And just for context, New Jersey is 6 hours from where I lived at the time. My alarm clock goes off. I sit up, I slide to the edge of the bed. I'm lacing up my work boots. And that morning, it was like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And one
Wow.
is saying, you're stuck here forever. I mean, you're never going to make this kind of money again. You got lucky to make this money in the first place. Do not be dumb. Do not mess this up. If you do work up the courage to leave, what will your friends think? You make a boatload of money
Mm.
compared to your friends, significance, that feels good, ego.
Right.
What are they going to think if you leave? if you leave, what's your family going to think? Your family's all super proud of you. You're successful now. What are they going to think? And this was the loudest one. If you do leave, do you think you're going to do this podcast thing? Like, that's really what we're going to fall back on. That is the plan B, this podcast thing. Okay. And in that moment, Whitney, I felt that if I was to take my life, I would take my problems with me. Now, I talk very often about the importance of the people around you. I messaged one of my friends, and he's, again, Alan, he's my co-host and the CEO. And I said, hey, man, I'm really struggling. I feel hopeless. I feel helpless. I feel trapped. I feel dark. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm having these thoughts. What do I do? And he said, Kev, over the last couple of years, your awareness has shifted so much, but your environments have remained the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. So I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later and going full time into what we're doing today. Now, that sounds awesome. But in the beginning, there was no money to be made. I had no idea what I was doing. I was $35,000 in credit card debt. I couldn't get Christmas presents for my girlfriend 2 years in a row. It was brutal. It was nothing short of brutal. But I will tell you this. After I left my job, I was walking around the kitchen one day, and I remember thinking to myself, Whitney, I have no money. Nobody is listening to the podcast, and I have no prospect of love. I am as single as you can possibly be. But for the first time in my life, I was really proud of myself. And that was a very weird feeling, a very unique feeling for me, because that wasn't something that I had ever felt before. And I think that was my initial understanding of, okay, fulfillment is drastically different than happiness. Happiness is results-based. If this interview goes well and Whitney loves me, I'll be happy.
Right.
No matter what, I will be fulfilled because I am in the process of doing what I should be doing. And I think that was a very interesting understanding for me when I kind of had to lose everything, because it helped me understand what's really important. Now, yes, money is important because you have to pay your bills, and I understand that. But more money is not necessarily going to create more fulfillment in your life. And I think that's a very important lesson for all of us. It was definitely an important lesson for me.
Yeah. Man, thank you for sharing so much of that. I actually loved that post that you posted where you said happiness, basically you said happiness is results driven, fulfillment is mission driven. And I thought that was really powerful because a lot of and I think life, like, we experience both happiness and fulfillment. Like, there's not one is better than the other, but it's understanding what is the driver here in me doing this, or why am I attracted to this job or this position or this purpose? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it because I'm results driven right now, or is it because I'm mission driven right now? And I think when we understand the two, that helps us understand priority, because that's what you ended up, that's the decision you ended up making. You were like, I am happiness. This is temporary. It's results driven. It's based off of money, all the things that are temporary, but I want to be mission driven. Like, I really hear your heart in that you wanted to do something that lit you up. You had a huge passion, and you're also in service to people, which made you feel like, like, this is something I want to do full time. That's really awesome.
I
And it's
think we
not
all
easy.
want to help. No, it's definitely not easy, but I think we all want to help a unique person in a unique way with our unique stories, where I think a lot of people get lost. And this is why I say the podcasting was kind of revealed to me. When I found the vehicle, things started to make more sense. So a lot of people ask me, like, how does somebody find their purpose? And it's like, I don't know. I don't think it's that easy. I don't think there's a snap your fingers answer for that. I think for a lot of us, it's hidden in the past. I've always wanted to help people. I've been coaching people on relationships for years, even though I didn't study it. There's just some things you intuitively know. I understand a certain behavior suggests the deeper root cause that you might not see. Okay, cool. That's interesting. But I think for a lot of us, we're looking for the vehicle. We want to help. We all want to help somebody or something in a unique way. But until the vehicle is highlighted for us, many of us don't think it's possible. And then even when the vehicle is, it's like, well, how am I going to make money doing that? I'd love to clean up the beaches, but who's going to pay me to do that? That's where things really get stuck. And I think for a lot of us, we have our P's in the wrong order. We start something from a place of profitability, and we try to convince ourselves that we're passionate about it. But if you started something from a place of passion and you found a way to make it profitable, it's almost the bow on top, where If you only do your job because you get paid, that's not really a recipe for success. Where if you do something so much and for so long, and because you love it so much that eventually you make money, it's kind of like it's a bonus, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
bonus that I get to podcast for a living now. It's awesome. I love that. But
Mm-hmm.
again, it's not because I started that way. I didn't start with this making money thing in mind. And I think that's important.
Yeah, that is important. I really like that. It makes sense. And I feel very much like how you described your earlier years with podcasting in the beginning. I mean, I'm like, that's totally like, I totally get it. I've been there, I am there, and we all have been. And I think that's the thing is with social media, with how we, display ourselves, we kind of put best foot forward,
Yep.
and that everything is okay, but not all the time is everything okay, and not all the time do you have a ton of money or are living the dream. But that is exactly living the dream, is doing something that you're passionate about that just so happens to pay you,
Mm,
that you're profiting as you're doing something that you love, but coming at it from that. I completely agree with that. I've navigated that way. I've worked all of the administrative jobs that I could possibly work. I've worked my way up the ladder. I've done all of that just so that I could make bills,
yeah.
pay bills, have some money like left over. When I lived in California, it was super expensive to live there.
Mm,
And it was really, really difficult and very empty. And so I always found myself teetering between doing church ministry, because that's how I grew up. And so I'd either be like youth pastor, part-time slash full-time, but, you know, not being paid. And then I'd have one foot in corporate just to make ends meet. And I was always really pissed off that I had to do that, that I couldn't just be in ministry and just be sustained. Like, I don't want to make millions. I
mm,
just want to be able to pay bills and do this, like I was just bare minimum,
yeah.
like whatever I can get by with. If I can just hand you my bills and you guys pay them, then we're good. Like I don't even need anything in my bank account, is how I felt about it. I want to ask you, because there's something in that transition period between moving from something where you've been, like your co-host said, environment.
Mm,
Your environment has remained the same, but you have changed. I think a lot of people are feeling that even right now, and it's really difficult. Like I hear a lot of even friends say, like, I'm so frustrated because I feel like change is coming, but I have no idea what that looks like. I feel so dissatisfied with my life, my relationships, my friendships even, right? But I feel like I'm nowhere. I'm like
mm.
in this in between. Can you speak to that and give maybe even like little nuggets of how do you transition, and how can you be encouraged and not hopeless, because that's exactly where you were at that time?
Yeah, I think this is the interesting thing. And I think, again, naturally, I go deeper understanding because I think awareness is the key for most of us. Most of us, if we're not aware, you can't take action. That's it in a nutshell. I think for many of us, we need to understand that there is mud between where we are and where we want to be. Now, this was my problem. Yeah, I want to be a podcaster. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to be a podcaster. But what I didn't understand is the mud for me was being broke for 2 years and being in debt and having anxiety attacks and getting to the
Yes.
point where I didn't know if I was going to make it another week. Somebody else out there, I think you have to understand, and it's weird because it almost sounds like it makes the problem worse, but I think it actually helps. You have to understand that what's coming is not perfect. It's progress. So it will up level from where you are to where you're going. There will be an up level there, but it's not like you're going to walk from dead grass to golf course grass. It doesn't work that way. There is some mud in between, and you have to figure out what your unique mud is. So for me, everybody thinks Kevin was miserable, left his job, now he's crushing it. That left my job middle part was a lot of mud. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you just have to get very familiar with what your mud is. Now, for me, leaving my job was the right thing because I was so it was a mentally dark time for me. Where somebody else, their mud might be staying in a job that they don't like for an extra year while
Right.
doing the side gig and figuring out, could I actually be a photographer? Could I actually be an event
Yeah.
coordinator? I
Yep.
think a lot of us want to jump. when in
Yeah.
reality, that's probably not what's best for most of us, because then
Yeah.
you're all the way in the pool and you don't really get to decide when you get out. So I think if you're out there, number one, ask yourself a simple question. It's really three. What are my core beliefs? What are my core values? And what are my core aspirations? That will help you at least understand yourself at a deeper level. And it should help you align the decision that you're going to make. And then ask yourself, okay, what is my current mud? What is the mud I am willing to go through in order to get to greener pastures? That is a question that I don't think a lot of us have the opportunity to ask, because we only think of the end goal, but we don't really think
Right.
of what's in between. Where are we and where we want to be? So that's what
Yes.
I would say. I would say ask yourself about yourself. What do you value as a human being? Cool. How can we get a little more of that now? We don't need to get all of it now, just a little bit more and a little bit more. Progress for most of us, it's enlightening. Progress for us creates hope. Progress for us creates momentum. It creates a brighter future, the light at the end of the tunnel. So finding
Right.
that progress, even if it's micro, I think is a great place to start.
That's really awesome. And I think too, the mud, I love that. The mud. I can talk about that forever. Um, can't we all? um, I really think that when you're in the mud that there is something that is being fashioned. And this may sound very whatever, woo-woo, but I really think there's something that is being worked out within you as you're in that transition. And mud is like the perfect visual for it because it takes effort, it takes perseverance. There may be times when you're wading in the mud
Of course.
because you just don't have the ability to move any further. You're just gassed. But I think that there's something really special actually that you wouldn't get if you were able to just hop,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
easy cake, Sometimes things happen like that, but most of the time they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's something of like character. It's character building to go
Yeah.
through the mud. And it actually, I think, even grows your capacity to contain what it is that you're about to step into,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Otherwise you wouldn't have it. So I think that's fascinating.
It's
I
beautifully said.
Yeah. I love that. It's so great. I really also loved the quotes that talked about accomplishing your goals, and then it is your identity that is helping you or holding you back from creating a more aligned life.
Mm.
And I thought that that quote was so important because a lot of times we identify, like you mentioned, like identifying as what I do, your foreman. This is what I do, this is
Yep.
who I am, I'm a foreman. And now I'm a podcast host and co-founder and all these things, entrepreneur. But I love that you said that your identity can either help you or it can hold you back from creating a more aligned life. And this is something that I know in transition we're kind of fashioning and forming. Like that's part of, I think, what hurts, what is so hard is the letting go of the old identity and the grabbing a hold of the new one.
Mm.
And even thinking that you could grab a hold of the new identity, the new place that you want to be or grow into. For you, I know that in your story, like you felt different, you felt more awake, you felt more aware, self-aware. For you in that transition period, what did you have to let go of in order to step into doing this full time?
Yeah. One of the things was I've always not felt good enough. Part of my identity was, I mean, again, even if you listen to the story sounds really good. Alan, my co-host, was one of the smartest kids in our school and went to one of the top technical schools in the world. I didn't go to college.
Wow.
That identity of I work with a genius, but I'm not one. That's
Mm.
like a weird thing,
Ooh.
right? Like that's a really weird thing for me. The I work with somebody who has studied business at a high level. I never have. I don't know anything about business. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. That has been my identity for most of my life. It's just
Mm.
I don't know enough. I'm not smart enough. I couldn't learn enough. I'm not good enough. I'm going to be left behind.
Where did that originate? Like, if you can look back in your childhood, do you see the origin of that?
Yeah, my dad left. My dad, I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. So I
Woo.
think, yeah, I think there was a part of me that assumed, and again, subconsciously, unconsciously, that it was my fault my dad left, not good enough, not smart enough. If I'm not good enough for you to be here, I mean, I'm not good
Right.
enough for anything in life. And this is the problem. And this is why identity is so important. That was my identity for a long time. Therefore, my beliefs and my actions and my results were in alignment with that. If you believe, if your identity is I am shy, I am quiet, and I am introverted, what are the odds that you get on stage in front of 1,000 people? Very low, very, very, very low.
Yeah.
And if you think to yourself, well, I'd really love to be a speaker, but it's not possible, that's your identity holding you back. So that was a big one for me, is I am good enough. That was a really weird shift for me. But, and I try to be honest about this because I don't want everything to be social media land, highlight land. I still have moments where I don't believe in myself. Still, I mean, before interviews, so that happens where I'll be like, am I out of my league here? Am I going to be able to hold my own? Or the listener's going to like me? Is the host going to like me? Am I going to be able to add value? I still have that. So that's something I really, really had to lean into and work through. And I think the other thing, the identity piece, was everybody must like me. That was a real big one for me, of everybody must like me. And I want you to like me. I really do. And I'm afraid that you're judging me. I am. But I also must believe at a deep level that the 5, 10, 15, 25 people that I will help will drastically outweigh the 1, 3, or 5 people that don't like me. And that's a very important shift. That was a really, really impactful one for me. So those are a couple. But it's hard, right? Because I say this to clients. I say there's 3 identities. You have the old identity, you have your current identity, and you have the future identity that you must adopt. When we break it down like that, it sounds pretty easy. Yeah. Who did you used to be? Who are you today? And who must you be to accomplish the goals and be the type of person that would attract and sustain the results you want? In practice, it's not that simple, but at least if you can break it down that way, my future identity, I'm confident. Okay, cool. What are you currently doing today to build confidence? Nothing. All right. That's a bottleneck. Let's work on that. I am well-spoken. Okay. What are you doing to practice your speaking or your communicating? At least it gives you an idea of, I want to show up as this version of blank in the future, but today I'm not doing the things necessary. All right. That's our bottleneck. That's our mud. Cool. Let's create some tactics based on that.
That's awesome. And that's really practical. Like, that's not complicated. That's actually really practical to work through. I also love that you said, focus on direction, not speed. And I thought that was fascinating, because the hustle is real when you're an entrepreneur. You're always like buzzing. And a lot of that is because you're just so passionate and you're so driven, which is great. But how do you stay focused on direction instead of how quickly things are manifesting or clicking into place and moving forward? How do you do that?
I think you have to look at, and again, this isn't a sexy answer, I think you have to look at the data. I really do. I think many of us, and I was definitely this way, I was just like, well, I feel like we're doing well. Yeah, I feel like people are really enjoying what we're doing. That's good. That's an important thing, because that's the creator. The creator feels the feelings and they feel the connection with what they're doing. That's the creator. But there is somebody who has to be tracking the data to realize, well, we improved 1% over the last couple of days. Like, that's really good. This is the other thing. I think that we all have misguided expectations. And this is all I mean. If Whitney calls me, says, hey, Kev, we're going to go for a run, I'm going to probably ask 3 questions. I'm going to ask, where are we going? When are we going? And how long is this run? How long is this run? Yeah. Because the length of the journey is going to dictate the specificity of the approach. If we're running 26 miles, I'm going to wear different shoes. I'm going to wear different pants. I'm going to bring more water. I'm going to have different music, whatever. I think a lot of us assume that we're running sprints, when in reality, we are running an ultra marathon. Then we immediately think, well, it's not growing fast enough. If you're doing this for the next 30 years, it's going to grow in correlation with the amount of time that you're practicing it for. That is an important understanding for a lot of us, that number one, you don't want it to grow as quickly as you think, because that brings a whole mess of problems you're not ready to handle yet.
Right.
Number two, You probably don't know what it takes to grow to the point you actually want to grow to yet, but you just don't know that yet because you're not far enough in the journey. So I think it's an understanding that, are my expectations of growth actually aligned? Or do I think I should be further along than I actually should based on advice that I was giving, based on social media, whatever it is? The other thing, a lot of us are comparing to the anomalies. Even I work with a lot of podcasters. People say, like, I want to be like Joe Rogan. That's not the goal. That's not the goal, right? Because 99.99 repeating percent of us will never be.
No.
Now, I think it's good to have that level of ambition and stretching, but if that's your expectation, you're always going to be let down, because that
Right.
most likely will never, it's not going to happen for me. And I'm the podcast guy, right? I'm not going to be Joe Rogan. It's not going to work that way. So I think that's the important understanding, is your expectations are determining your expectations. And if
Mhm.
your expectations are off, everything kind of is. This is the other thing. If you aren't somebody who likes data, whatever, literally, what is the thing that you could track once
Okay.
a week? Number of podcast downloads, number of dollars in the bank, number of client calls, number of, whatever, projects done. At least that'll give you a logical, non-emotional outcome. And you'll be able to look at that and say, okay, cool, this is actually working or it's not. And then the
Mhm.
last thing too, Whitney, and this is the hardest thing to account for, is time. Sometimes you're doing the right thing in the right way at the right pace. Time just hasn't caught up yet. So
Right.
you have to reflect on, how long have I been doing this? What results have I gotten from this? There's a lot of small things that make up big growth. And if you don't know what they are, it's hard to recognize.
Yeah, that's so good. It's so good. If someone were to say that to me, like I want to be like Joe Rogan, I think I've even said like, God, if I could be like anyone, it'd be like Oprah, you
Mm,
know,
yeah.
just as it being a woman, and it's like, ooh, like look at
Mm.
her on her Soul Sundays. But there's an element of attraction there, and I think it's really good to even understand, why am I attracted to this person, or why do I see myself and have this like, oh, I want to be like Joe Rogan, I want my podcast. Is it to be successful like them? Is it to have that much of a reach and influence?
Mm.
What is it? Is it to have that caliber of guests, on your podcast? What is it? Do you just like the style? Do you just want to smoke a cigar and have a conversation, and record it? Like, what is it about, Joe Rogan, or for me, Oprah, that you love so much? Because a lot of times it's not that you will become them, because they are them. There's only one Joe Rogan,
Mm.
one Oprah, but you are Kevin, you
Yeah.
know? I am Whitney. There's only one of us too. So
Mm.
what is the element that you're attracted to? And how can you basically implement that? How can you step into that? If that's something you're attracted to and you want to step into, that can be, again, another way to kind of see direction
Yeah.
of like, where do I want to go? That can be
Yeah.
a sign. I think a lot of people can be our signs,
Mm.
and show us what's even possible as well. Like, that's how you fell into podcasting. So
Yeah.
it's really fun and
What
exciting.
you admire, there's something behind that, right? There's something behind what you admire, is a hint of what you want to become in your own unique way. And
Yes.
I love that, right? Like, I want you to be your version of Oprah. I love that. And if you're out there, I want you to be your version of Joe Rogan, or whoever it is for you. But it's very important to understand that it's hard to reverse engineer the anomalies. That's the really hard thing, is people say, well, I want my podcast to be Joe Rogan. It's like, well, I understand what you're saying. But, and to your point, why? Well, I want to be able to interview awesome people. Love that. That's great. Awesome. There's many ways you can do that. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, you got to get down to the root cause of the thing that you're thinking about. I mean, that really is hyper consciousness in a nutshell, understanding
Yeah.
why below the initial level and layer of why.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It's so good. It's so food for thought for anyone that is wanting to go into business or start a new career, podcast, whatever it is that you want to do. It's so good to even write down a list of things that you admire in the people that are already doing what you want to be doing, and
Mm.
then see what feels authentic to you
Yeah.
and see how you can make it more like yourself. What would be your flavor? How would you add value?
Mm.
by doing the same thing, you know? I think as entrepreneurs, we're always trying to find the niche, and we're always trying to niche down and find the niche that isn't a niche yet. And that's a fun game to kind of see. But I think a lot of the times it's just really like, I have this idea, I have this inspiration, I have this dream, and
Mm.
I want to make it happen. So I love the advice that you've given is invaluable, and it's not even super deep. It's just
Mhm.
really practical and nuts and bolts. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
On kind of a more personal note, uh, I love the fact, and I see the pictures behind you of your family, and I wanted to ask about that. What was the process of you finding your family, finding your spouse partner, and trusting that, having come from a place of feeling unworthy? Um, even if you know how you attracted that, was it the shift that you had internally that then attracted the people that you have in your life now?
It's interesting because I think that so I met my wife, she's my wife now, when I was probably 27 and I'm 33. So I met her on OkCupid, I think. So
I
dating
love
app. I
it.
met her on a dating app. We connected, and I think at a level I was just scared. I mean, I was still trying to figure myself out. I was a bodybuilder who really cared about exercise and just getting jacked. I didn't really care about much else. She was somebody who was very into self-improvement, personal development. I wasn't at the time. So I think there was a part of me that thought, I'm in over my head here. I don't deserve this necessarily. This is like the sweetest human ever. I don't deserve this. So I ended up saying, hey, look,
Mm,
I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want to hurt you and I don't want to lead you on. I don't really think I want a relationship right now. And we ended up going our own ways. And shortly thereafter, I really got into like the self-improvement. Really, 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 really got into it. And I could not find a partner that I felt aligned. Right?
mm,
Like I was on the dating apps or whatever. People would say, "Hey, I have a friend that you might hit it off with." And there was always something missing. And this was always
yeah.
my thing. They just don't get me. I just can
Hmm.
tell they don't understand. Like, "Oh, you're a podcaster. What do you do? Like, what are you doing? Are you going to go get a job?" It's like, "No, no, no, you don't understand. This is my job. I know I don't make any money yet, but like this is my job. It's going to be awesome, I promise." So I remember saying to my friends, Whitney, I remember I literally said, I don't want I'm this dating thing, I'm done with it. I don't want to date anymore. I don't want to do this. I said, I
Yeah.
need somebody who understands me. And I said, I know Taryn does. Taryn understands me. I know it. She gets me. She's always gotten me. She believed in me long before I believed in myself. So she was dating somebody at the time. So I creeped for a little bit. And then I remember just being super, super, super lonely for however long.
Mm,
I saw that she was single. I sent her a message and said, "Hey, do you want to grab coffee?" She said, "Make it tea, and you got yourself a date." And we went out and we like reconnected. And I told her, she said, "Well, I thought we were," she said this in after, right? She said, "I thought we were just meeting as friends." And I said, "No, I never would have messaged you if I didn't plan on marrying you. That's the only reason I started this.
wow.
I didn't want to like just sleep together. I didn't want to just talk. I wanted us to be together forever. That was really what I was playing for." For me, it's a place of being understood. And it's
Mhm.
also a place of this is how I know because I feel safe. I I'm out here doing it every day. I'm out here just talking into this microphone, hoping somebody is listening. And this is like my life, like in the public eye, in the public eye. When I'm done at night, I want safety. I want comfort. I want snuggles. That's what I want. And that is what I get. I feel very safe. She is my home. So I think for me, it was the understanding that before I had any of this quote unquote perceived success, she was there. That's how I feel safe. It's not about the money or the podcast. She doesn't care about that. And I know that. She knew me when I was just regular Kev, not self
Mhm.
improvement, next level you, hyper conscious Kev. She knew me long before I was who you see in front of you today. So that has given me a lot of safety, a lot of comfort, and a lot of certainty that this is the person that, and I won't say this is the person I'm supposed to be with because I don't necessarily know if that exists. This is the person that I know I can make it work with. I think that's an
Mhm.
important distinction for me.
That is really important. I think both, having both, even of like, yeah, I feel like this is a soul connection.
Mm.
Like, I feel like Maybe even you feel past life related, who knows? But I think it's really practical to even think of it that way. This is somebody that I can partner with,
Yeah.
somebody I can work with and have do life with, have a family with, all
Yeah.
those things. It's
It's
really
work.
important.
It is. I know a lot of us want to think, everything flows to me, and that's fine, right? That's
It's
a
great.
phase, and
Great
that's
mantra.
right. That's a phase and maybe a phrase, and maybe it is a reality. But a relationship will be challenged. The goal of a relationship is growth. The the necessities to create growth are usually some sort of resistance and conflict. So if
Mhm.
you don't have that in your relationship in some way, shape, or form, you're probably not growing at the rate you could. And
Right.
that's okay, right? I know we all want to have happy, fulfilled, passionate, aligned relationships. That's great. But there will be some sort of challenge in there because that's what facilitates the growth. It is work. It
It is
is.
work.
But it's the work you want to do. That's the important
Yes.
part.
Yes. Yeah. Same as a business or purpose or mission, passion that you're doing. Relationships are exactly the same.
Yes.
They're really no different. So your heart is in it just as much,
Yes.
and your life is
Probably
just,
more.
yeah,
Probably
true.
more, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you said feeling safe. And I think also, too, the element there is respected. I
Mm,
think a lot of men love is respect. And she respected you from the beginning, regardless, and you weren't experiencing that. Other women were challenging you and saying, "Oh, I don't know if I can
yeah.
do that,"
Well, and
because you don't have a typical job.
yeah. The other part of it was I was a tattooed bodybuilder who was kind of a bro. I don't think people were dating me for my brains necessarily.
Sure.
I was in really good shape. So, and again, that is what it is, right? That's, that happens, and I don't hold anything against them for that. But I do believe that what my wife saw in me was more my brains than anything else. And that
Hmm.
was very weird for me because that's not, again, going back to identity. I've always been in really good shape. I've never been very smart. That was my identity. So you often use what you can to get the results that you want.
Hmm.
That's an important thing for me too, where
Mm.
it's it's almost like when you have a real partnership, and again, this is a fine line, but you're willing to sacrifice together. I think that's an important thing where, again, she's paid rent, she's bought groceries when I couldn't. Like, she's not on the front lines doing what I'm doing, but she's not behind me. They say
Right.
behind every successful man is a woman.
Yeah.
No. And first of all, it's behind every human is a human. It doesn't have to be a man and a woman. And I think it's actually beside you. It's
Hmm.
not behind me,
Alongside. Yeah.
alongside. Yeah. This person is beside me in the mission with me, just not showing up in the ways that I show up necessarily. And that's the polarity. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what you just said too around I used what I thought I had. It like and I think that's also identity and limiting
Mm,
because it can be a limiting belief. Like I think I'm only a bro. I think
yeah.
I'm only a bodybuilder that has tats and looks awesome. And so like this I'm going to work with this because I have nothing else. And I think that too is very limiting. I'm even when you said that I was like bling, I was like
Mm,
all the things that I think I am and think I have, but don't see what else I have and the possibility or the potential that I can even have that's already within me. It's just I haven't stepped into it yet because I
mm,
don't believe that that's possible, right?
yeah.
Or I don't think I have that resource within me. And so many of us don't realize what we actually have and what we can actually work with. And it's oftentimes not until somebody shows us,
Yeah.
right, that
Yeah.
we think it's possible. So that's really encouraging. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Significance is a hell of a drug.
Woo!
That's an interesting thing where, again, I was always we used to have a joke, my friends and I. If somebody spilled something, my shirt would be off before it even, like, the glass wasn't even all the way over, and I would take my shirt off because I was always in really good shape, and I always got significance from that. Here's the
Yeah.
interesting thing. You can also get significance from adding value, from your mission, from your purpose, from your passion, but it's interesting. You won't get significance in the beginning. That's the interesting thing, is you're actually going to get resistance. You get resistance. Now I have so much significance and I feel so fulfilled in my life from the podcast. Right? That's just what I do every single day. Love that.
Yep.
But in the beginning, I had to battle for that with a bunch of people who didn't believe in it. of like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to leave your job and do this podcast thing? Are you going to make money? Is this person paying you? There was a lot of that in the beginning, but now that's the thing that brings me the most significance. And again, we talked about the mud earlier. I've had to let go of some of the other things that brought me significance, right? In
Mm-hmm.
order to get to where we are today. And now I have different things that bring me significance. But significance is a hell of a drug. And we have to be very careful, because if you're posting certain pictures, and this is always my thought, if you're posting the picture and you have the BMW emblem from your car in the picture and you have to make sure it's in there, is that because you think people will look at you differently if you have it? Or do you post the bathing suit picture because you know you'll get X amount of likes? Like, you just have to be very careful and very conscious about why you're doing what you're doing and what
Mm-hmm.
is the result and the emotion you're basing your actions off of.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I appreciate about you, even in just this conversation, but also in what you post, is that you're very transparent and very real. I've had interviews, I've been on podcasts where I've followed them, and I see that they're basically saying one thing, but that's, I know just from private conversations, or offline when we were chatting, that for an instance, for an example, her husband is completely supporting her. Like, she
Mm,
doesn't have to work,
yeah.
right? Which is totally fine. No judgment. But what she was doing with that was coaching and promoting people stepping out into the unknown and taking the risk and starting the business or starting the podcast and doing whatever their passion was. But yet she could do that in the safety of having financial support,
Mm,
a home over her head. And if you're me, I'm single, I'm 35 and single. And for me to step out and take that risk, that means that I could not have a home, I could lose my car, right? Like, any resources that I need in order to live and exist, including having food.
mm,
That could totally be a risk that is very painful and a hard lesson learned, which I think everything on our soul journey is meant to be experienced, and it's all fine. In the end, I believe it washes out. But
mm,
what I didn't appreciate was people don't know that. She only displays that she did this big risk. Look, she pursued her passion, and this is how she did it, and this is the list that she wrote, and then went and did it. And so I'm going to coach you and teach you how to do this. But yet she has somebody, a partner next to her, who is supporting her as she's taking these risks. It's really actually not that risky.
mm,
And so I find in the space that we're in, a lot of people will say things like that, or they'll show off different things. And it's like, dude, that was a rental slash that wasn't even your car, or like
mm.
his car. And but it's just like something that they found downtown that they took a picture next to,
Yeah.
kind of showing off, saying like, look what I am, like, I'm in front of the Fairmont, with a nice BMW. And it's like, oh, but that's not actually reality. Like,
Yeah.
you don't own that car, and you're not staying at that hotel, you just happen to be walking down the street.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. So I appreciate your transparency in this episode, and the fact
Thank
that
you.
you are real about the journey, because that's what actually can help people and impact people in a positive way, that is in service to their passions and them living their dreams and pursuing them, and understanding that the journey may be an ultra marathon, not so
Mm.
much a sprint. So
Well, thank you.
um
I
I
appreciate that.
yeah, of course. I would love for you to share with people where they can find you. If you're promoting anything right now, or if you have anything upcoming, I really want to make sure people can get a hold of you and connect with you too, and just continue to be inspired by the work that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I always just send people to the podcast. That's where you'll learn the most about us. You'll learn from what we do. You'll say one of two things. Yes, these are my type of people. No, these aren't. That's the best place. I don't want your money or anything. I'd rather you listen to the show and see if we're a good fit. We do 7 episodes a week. So every single day there's a mentor in your pocket for free. Next Level University, all the podcast platforms, YouTube. And then if you have any questions about podcasts or anything, you can reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is @NeverQuitKid, and then Kevin Palmieri on Facebook and LinkedIn. So anything you need, I'm happy to answer.
That's awesome. And I have all that in the show notes for you
Thank
guys,
you.
so you can connect with Kevin. So thank you, Kevin, so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing so much. This was so amazing, added so much value, and I really appreciate you. I would love to have you back on in the future.
Consider it done. Thank you so much for the thoughtful and thought-provoking questions and a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Kevin.